Welcome, Hotshots, to Flashlight by Firepower X. Here you can find the industrial strength tools you need to dominate your personal and professional wellness as a firefighter. My name is Just. I'm your host for today's webinar, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's special guest, retired Fire Chief Tom DeSorcy. Tom joined the fire service in 1983 and became the first paid firefighter in his hometown of Hope, British Columbia. He became fire chief in the year 2000 and retired in 2023, not too long ago. And Tom is a former broadcaster and current podcast host of Firefighting in Canada. He's also voiceover talent and a peer support team member. Welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us on the show today. So good to have you here.
Thanks, Jess. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So everyone has an origin story. How did you get into firefighting to begin with in 1983?
Well, firefighting, I don't know that it's typical in terms of the plan was in place that this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to go to school, I'm going to be a firefighter. And it was that small town thing, growing up in high school, not knowing what was next in terms of graduation, and radio came into play, and broadcasting and performing, and I wanted to do that kind of stuff. And so I got involved in the early days of broadcast school. But my dad was in the volunteer fire department. We actually had one of the fire sirens for the town outside our house. So I was embedded in the fire hall, didn't really know it, because looking back, I go, I was a fire hall kid. I was those guys that hung around with our parents at the parties and stuff. And so the opportunity presented itself where they brought your name forward to the volunteer department. They would invite you to be a member if you were approved by the current members. Yeah, I was brought in 1983 and became a member, automatically got assigned to be in charge of the social committee. And that was my foray into firefighting. But again, not thinking that it's ever going to be a career, but that's how I got started in small town volunteer fire department, where we were more a social club than a fire department. We didn't go to a lot of fires. We only went to fires. We didn't do anything else. And training was, yeah, let's go drive around in the summertime and spray water. It was really sad compared to what I know now and where it is, right?
Oh, the golden era. Yes. I remember 1996, we had a taste of that as well in small town Pennsylvania. So thank you for taking me back to the nostalgia. How did you then end up fire chief overnight? I remember you telling me that this essentially happened to you overnight. If it was never in the plan, yeah, how did that happen?
Well, I don't know how far back to go. It essentially was overnight. The
Hmm.
community I live in we are about 2 hours east of Vancouver in British Columbia, and we were a population of about 3,500 people.
Hmm.
And we had two outlying areas. It was a border kind of thing to the next community. And from downtown to the main area, living area, this was probably about 2 kilometers, like very close. Part of our community, really, part of the trade community. The people shopped in the stores. They were just homes on either west or east side of our community. It finally became evident in the community that they needed to have these two, three communities become one community. Had its, I guess, positives at the time for tax base, would have the negatives because you'd pay extra for policing from the federal force, mind you. But you also had three fire departments because each of these little areas, Hope and the outlying areas, all had their own fire halls. And so that was the community-based fire department because the neighboring communities were not going to expect or get service from the main town because the main town says, we're our own thing. We don't want to go out of town, so to speak. And those departments were formed and ran on themselves, built their own little fire halls, had their own little funds, had their own little elected chiefs. Every hall, as you probably recall, you voted the chief in every year, and there was no real qualifications. It wasn't paid. It was sort of paid on call. And I say sort of because it depended which department you were in, that they handed out money at Christmas time or
Hmm.
depending on how many calls you went to. So it was loosey-goosey that way. They finally got it put together, and then they realized that when they put it together, they actually had three fire departments that existed legally in this one district community and felt that someone from the outside, I have no idea who, said, you got to get that together. You need to organize this as one organization, one separate entity. The legal letters and such basically took all the ownership of the department, of the departments, of the fire halls, of the vehicles, all the apparatus, all of the equipment. That became part of the new district. But again, they needed to coordinate the management side of it. So push comes to shove. I joined my early days in the Hope department. I then moved back to Hope after I went away to Vancouver for a couple of years, came back here, and had lived in one of those outlying areas. I joined that department when I came back. And so I was currently a member of one of those fire departments. And they put the word out and said, hey, the district's amalgamated. We need to put these fire departments together. We have an opportunity for an interim fire chief to take over the amalgamation of these three departments. It's a 10-month contract. That's it. And we are looking for someone from the fire department already to step up, one of the volunteers. And I said myself, I was working for the radio station then and actually managing the radio station locally, and thought to myself, it might be fun, might be worth something. And it was a little bit later into it to go realize, yeah, this might actually develop into something. But let's start with this. So I put my hand up and put my name in, and I got the job. It was a 10-month gig. Soon realized that we had an administrator at the time, our town manager at the time, and I asked the question. I said, so what happens in 10 months? Does this go away? You kind of need a manager. You need a fire chief. I was the interim fire chief with no real set plan, just put it together, get the amalgamation happening. Soon got pushed into this motivational leadership role where you had some firefighters that wanted to move to a new department, some didn't. You had some pride and ownership that didn't exist and that did exist. And so you soon found out that you needed to take some steps and create some things. And we were fortunate to be on the precipice, as it were, big word for the day, that there was going to be some changes in training standards in the province. And I kind of learned that over the year. I said, things are going to get a lot more difficult, as it were. This is not the old boys club anymore. This is going to be a little bit different. And just asked the administrator, asked the city manager, town manager. I said, what can I do to put myself in a position to take a job if it becomes available? And he happened to have a friend that managed the fire academy at the Justice Institute in British Columbia. Said, we got a perfect program for this person. It's a brand new course. It's called Fire Officer 1. It's a new thing. We're just starting to teach it. He should enroll in this. It's perfect, especially for a volunteer turning into a fire chief or a manager. So there you go. I was in the first ever class of Fire Officer 1 at this institution in Vancouver, and carried on. As things progressed with the radio station, it soon happened that a larger corporation in Canada bought out our small town radio station, and the owners sold it. And writing was on the wall. I think that station was going to be amalgamated into a bigger network. And I happened to sort of have a place to fall, if you will. So it was coincidental. My boss, the owner of the radio station at the time, had encouraged me to take this training. Didn't say why, but he thought it was good for me, that maybe I should take this course. And obviously there was a pending sale of his company coming. So things aligned. And that's how all of a sudden I took on a position and then became a paid full-time position. And much to the chagrin of some of the town folk, most of the town folk, because it was new. I was not recognized as a firefighter, was not the person that was brought in from outside. I think that's what the public would expect, that a retired firefighter from the city would be hired for this position. Yet you took a local guy that was on the radio and did a morning show and a talk show, and he's not a firefighter. What does he know? We can't afford this. And that's when the journey, as it were, in a long story made short, happened.
Wow, it sounds like a right time, right place scenario, which you and I have talked about. So, what is the significance and recognizing the significance of that? Let's dive into that because we've talked
Yeah.
about that offline.
Well, and I soon realized in things that I've done in my career or in my time, and it took me took me a hard time to say career, because at the end of the day, when I hear people say that in my career, for a couple of years, quite a few years, felt bad about this position.
Hmm.
I felt I didn't earn the position. I was just a volunteer firefighter. Bam, I'm now a fire chief. As I met other fire chiefs and other firefighters, I saw the ranking procedures. I saw the steps that a lot of them have taken and to get to positions, and they put in their time and became captains and lieutenants and different positions, from deputy and assistant chiefs, and eventually getting to be the fire chief. And I started as fire chief. The only paid position I had in the fire department was fire chief. I felt, gee, is that wrong? Is that bad? But then I look back, and as I've told you in previous conversations, I said, that you got to take a look at what you've done in your life and recognize the significance of what you did, steps you took that weren't intentional, but you realize that, wow, I'm glad I did those steps then, knowing what I know now. If I knew that then, it would be different, maybe. But I took those steps without any plans and without any thoughts that this is what I'm going to do. This is the path of progression that I need to take. Yet I go back and go, yeah, it worked out. This is was meant to be. And that thing that people say that things happen for a reason, a lot of things, everything in my life happens for a reason. And it's to this get to this conversation with you today, ideally, that the people I've met, the people I know in the fire family that I would not have known, the conversation that I've had with our firefighters here in town, and I know we'll get to the where we are today in the position we have today, but the people that are with our fire department today, and now some of them have moved on to the city to career positions from our volunteer ranks, they wouldn't have known each other if they hadn't met me.
Hmm.
And sounds like, wow, this is you're a pretty big guy. But at the end of the day, you have to recognize the fact that I brought you in the fire department. You were, and bam, you guys gelled together. You guys became close friends. All of you did. And some of you moved on to other positions and, in fact, still work together in larger departments. And you
Hmm.
make them recognize the significance of what they did to join the fire department when they joined it. And I think I've mentioned to you the bucket list
Hmm.
comment. I'm not a big fan of that. People have this
Mm.
list. I picture people, this is on my bucket list. I got to go do it. How about just making up the list of accomplishments that you've done and say, this is the significance of these things that happened to me, and go,
Hmm.
yeah, that was pretty good. There's no pressure for me to go check another thing off my list. I'm just
Hmm.
going to go back on what I've done today, what I did last year, and go, wow, that was pretty significant. There's a reason I did this. I didn't plan to do it, but it worked out. And I think that's what people need to put in their mind and not be focused on trying to get things done.
Hmm. So recognizing the opportunity that's in the here and now of how things naturally unfold, as opposed to getting distracted by far off goals. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely. To me, yeah, I don't know how people seriously take the bucket list idea as something they just have to do. But maybe there are some that end up doing that. It becomes this need that I've got to fill this list. It's funny because there are TV shows on cooking channels, right, in both Canada and the US that some famous chefs, talk show or hosts rather, show hosts will go around from restaurant to restaurant and try the food in these restaurants. There's a Canadian one, there's an American one. One of the Canadian ones, a bunch of us got on this kick where we were going to go out, and our mutual friend Arjuna and I started this little wherever we go, we're going to go find these restaurants. There's a
Mhm.
map on the line. It's a whole check off thing. It didn't become an obsession, but it did get kind of fun. And I go, this is almost like a bucket list. We got to go to this place. But we weren't traveling there just to see these places. We just happened to look to see where they were and if they happened to be where we happened to be. And that was the difference, I think, in terms of this is on our, we got to go get this done. Because why are we pushing ourselves in our world, especially the fire service, to make sure we get this done? Some room has to be left for finding for yourself, going and saying, yeah, that was pretty cool. That was cool. I traveled. I was a liquor salesman. I started out my pre-fire career as being a liquor rep. I was a
Mhm.
wine salesman in the city, in between radio and fire. And I got into this, and they took me as part of a team to train in Europe. And we're in Europe, I think it was 1990 or so, and Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada, crossing the border from France into Germany, realizing that in Berlin they're taking the wall down. There's no social media. We have no idea what's going on other than we realized on local newspapers that we're going into a party. And I think I didn't plan to go there, but I happened to be there. And
Mhm.
it's again something you tell your kids. People come up, I tell people I meet like yourself and say, "Hey, I was in Germany the weekend the wall came down." Recognizing that that was kind of neat, and you go,
Mhm.
"Yeah." And so I hope people take the moment to go, "I was down in this community, I was in this city, I was at this location on this day that something happened. Wow, I'm going to remember that." And that's that little piece of time that you should put aside.
And I do think in the fire service, we have the tendency, I think it's with promotions, of constantly striving for the promotions and the people who are real achievement based and missing the moment to moment calls that you run and the significance that you have. Would you agree with that?
I do. Every call that you go on, it doesn't have to be a major life-changing worldwide event. Every
Hmm.
call you go on, it's the adage that we tell people that your worst day is our everyday. And yeah, certainly I trigger calls that I remember and things I go back on, but I try to remember the significance of me being a part of that call and what I did difference wise
Hmm.
versus if I did anything different wise at all. And yeah, you have to remember and have this thought that maybe it's the positive outcome that I try to come up with or the positive nature that I survive in every day is that there's a reason for something, there's a reason for everything, and there was a reason why we were on scene that day to help the person. In a smaller community, you may or may not realize that we know most of the people we respond to. And the chances of us knowing them or knowing their families and dealing with them. They
Hmm.
know me. They know that person coming in the door as a school teacher that taught and teaches their kids. It could be their doctor, dentist, chiropractor, could be their plumber. It could be anybody that walks in the door is now a different person. I've got the suit on. I'm now here to help you. Some people, oh, really? Oh, you know how to do that? Yeah, we got you.
Hmm.
And recognize that no matter how insignificant you think it was, that everything you do has an impact on somebody for whatever reason.
Hmm. How can leaders bring more of that mindset to their crews? I've never been a fire chief, but they can get very distracted too with kind of the political maneuvering and accreditation. And I think it's easy to get distracted. So, what can leaders do to bring more of that into their firehouses?
Well, I think first off, we're all leaders. Everyone's a leader. Some have to be more important and more timely leaders, as it were, or be responsible people that are looked upon as being in charge. But every firefighter, every person in any group or community organization, you empower them to do certain things. And it's that empowerment that says, I trust you. I know you know what you're doing. I just need you to do it, and I'm going to be there. And they realize, I hope, that you're going to be there to have their back, but also you're going to have their front if they're not performing properly or make you look bad. This is a team effort. We work together. I will look after you. I will take care of you in times of trouble. Do best what I can for you to make things easy for you in terms of what you need for training, what you need for equipment and gear, helping you become successful. In a volunteer fire department, it's not about promotions.
Hmm.
Again, I started as a fire chief. I
Yeah.
don't come up and I'm going to make my department accredited. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get the job done. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go right here but to keep my job and
Hmm.
deal with the outside pressures of the public that didn't want a paid position in their small town. And fast forward to today where it's become the norm. And I go, more significance, I created that. I go back, wow, I got to remind myself. And maybe that is part of it. You have to go back and remind yourself that you did good. So for the volunteer firefighter, for the staff member, and they're all staff, they're all working for us,
Hmm.
that they're doing the job, they're leading their crew, they're leading the charge, as it were, the two people that knock on the door to treat a person for a medical call. You've taken the lead. I'm not there looking over your shoulder. You did the right. You hear on the radio how they responded, what they did on scene, what they report back, and you go, thank you. Good job. Credit them for what they've done. Give them
Hmm.
the confidence that they know what they're doing and they're going to be able to do it again quite easily.
Yes. Yes. And I like that just reminder that we're all leaders and the impact that we have in the smallest ways in every
Mhm.
call and in our firehouse too. The perspective that we bring is also valuable. So, what about those people that slip in that I didn't sign up for this? Why does that phrase get under your skin?
I'll mention this at the end, a little bit more detail, I'm sure, but I wrote a column once, and this came out of really nowhere. How to deal with these people? Again, here's a radio station guy who was a volunteer firefighter who had not put in his term time. He was 1983, gone away for a couple of years, came back. So now we're talking, I want to say 1999. I come back in this position, take on this job again, just one of the team, one of the crew that knows how to put the boots on and the jacket and put the air pack on that you might be able to wear if there's one available. That trained, practiced. We did a couple of call outs. Things were getting busier in this era versus 83. The 90s were a little different. All of a sudden, I'm taking on this position and I'm in charge. And I don't know what to be in charge is. I managed a radio station, I managed staff, but fire department, again, ooh, okay, what do we do here? And I had that. I had this. We got to increase our training. We got to improve this. We got to take these courses. We've got to add on to this. And a couple of guys came up from the old department And they'd been there for a couple of years, but said, I didn't sign up for this, joining this other department and being part of this real fire department. I kind of liked the social club that we had. I said, yeah, we still have a social club. We still had beer in the fridge at that time, and we still had a pool table and a couple of them, and we still partied it up kind of thing and had drinks on practice nights and stuff. But at the end of the day, things are going to change. Well, I'm not into that. So I said, oh, how do I handle that? And I took a page out of one of my radio programs. I had a guest in British Columbia here, a gardening guru, I called him. And he still runs a very successful garden center and very knowledgeable on horticulture. And I know nothing about this kind of stuff. I mow the lawn. Lucky to do that, right? And so he told me one time, I was on the radio show, and the kind of talk show that you really didn't have to do a lot of talking because the guest and the incoming phone calls took care of it for an hour. And it was like, good morning, how are you? And do we have any people want to talk? And boom, the phone lines would light up. This is great. I just sat back and watched the clock. And one of the things that I started with one morning, had to start the show, was talking about the lawn. I said, I got this problem. I got moss in one corner of my lawn, and I've been buying this poison and pouring it on there and really spending the money and fighting this moss. And he says, don't. I said, what? Leave it alone. Let the moss go. Feed the grass around it. Feed the grass. Yeah, dump this grass seed, just rake it a little bit, but give more love to the lawn versus the moss and attention. And that kind of didn't dawn on me at that time, but later on at the fire hall, I went, feed the grass, ignore the moss. So when you put the analogy that these people that didn't sign up for this as the moss, there was 6 or 8 or 10 other people that were really into making things change, then I focused my energies and attention on them. The people that didn't sign up for it, they went on their own and they left and they went away. And so moss and grass became this leadership message that I wrote about, that I talk about, that ends up on the bulletin board on a few chiefs who've told me that they put that on the wall from the magazine. And the thought goes, focus your energies and attentions on people that want to be part of the team. And again, a volunteer organization tells me that if you don't, you're going to either jump on board with what people are doing, or you're going to take your highway down the road and leave. Make the decision. You're not firing people. You're just, again, feeding the grass. And if you want to be fed, then become grass.
Oh, that's good. That's deep there. Let's weave retirees into this because I think they are the grass. They still want to be heavily involved in some capacity. So, how can we better integrate retirees into the grass, into our healthy lawn?
Well, in our department here in Hope, and I say our department, I'm still a member of the fire department. I'm retired as the fire chief. Legally and technically, I'm a paid on call member. Do I go to calls and training? No. Do I go to training to teach people? Yeah, I do that once in a while, but I have other roles. I'm in peer support. I do other work for the fire cold zone work if need be. But the thing that I see, and again, all of my fire career has been based on what I saw people do. This wasn't a book that I opened up and you go to training, you go take fire officer courses. They teach you how to manage people. They teach you Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs and all this kind of stuff. The first day I walked into this classroom, I go, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't want to go back to school since I graduated in 1980. And what am I doing going to school again? I didn't know if I liked this idea. I had to write. And before I started writing anything, you'll be expected to produce 1,200 words or something. I went, no, really? I didn't go to university. I didn't do this. I went to broadcasting school where they taught me how to talk over the intro of a record and hit the post before the song starts, those kind of things. But again, I had to watch people. And of course, I joined associations. I got involved in our Provincial Chiefs Association, got involved in the National Chiefs Association. Best things I ever did, to meet up with your peers and find out what really goes on in other departments and realize that there is no model. There is no, this is the way your uniform, this is the basis. Your crest is made up of however you want to make it up. If you want to wear stripes on the top or the bottom, well, your wide stripes, thin stripes, whatever you guys do, this is some of the standards. So I'm learning this kind of stuff. So now I'm thinking ahead to, is retirement a possibility? I've got this pension plan. I'm going, oh, wow, okay. When I'm 65 or 60 rather, I can take the pension at early because that's the fire service. Okay, great. I'm going to do that. And there's personal reasons for me doing that. But I took that and I said, okay, so what happens in retirement? Well, I saw what everyone else was doing, where the larger departments I thought were people retired and they were gone.
Hmm.
You're out. See you
Yeah.
later. Thanks for coming. Remember him? Remember her? She was a retired. Goodbye. See you later. And I thought, oh, wow. Is that what's supposed to happen? Like when you retire, they just go clip, see ya. And I was talking with the new fire chief, who was my deputy, who I brought in to succession plan and leave the legacy behind, so to speak. And he wanted me to be a part of the
Hmm.
department. And I said, well, I'm happy to understand that I'm not going to be the person that's going on the call. I'm not going to be, unless you need me to, but I'm not up to standard anymore. My certifications have lapsed and I'm not planning to bring them back in. But I think I have a role and I agree with that. So what I see, and I use a lot of analogies. You read my stuff. I do a lot of comparing to different things. And my analogy was having depth in the organization, having that person in the room, as it were, kind of a
Hmm.
sports thing, where when you bring a brand new firefighter, and I'm now an indoctrinator, I'm now a recruiter, where I do the presentation to the new people. I'm the old guy showing you this organization, introducing you to the chief, the deputy, the assistant chiefs, and the members of the organization. So my
Hmm.
new role is such that I'm a mentor, I'm a peer support person, I'm talking to people, I'm having conversations, I'm introducing them to the fire service, not
Hmm.
necessarily the fire hall. So when you walk into our fire department, hopefully you can look around the room and go, wow, I have a place here for a long time if I want it. And they value every member of the department. And every member of the department has their own role and has a contributing role, no
Hmm.
matter what it is.
Hmm.
And that's the intent is that you see I've got a uniform, I've still got a tunic, it's got retired written on it. I represent the fire department in a lot of functions and those kind of things because I am history. I'm once a fire chief, you're always a fire chief.
Hmm.
You just don't happen to be the fire chief. And you have five stripes. I'm still recognized as chief. I stop by the hall. I'm again connecting the family as best I can to show you that once you leave us, we ostracize you and we don't talk to you anymore. No,
Hmm.
you're part of our team. You retire, you step aside for making room for someone else. And again, I told the fire chief, the new next fire chief, the latest fire chief, I said, what you do for me as a retired person is what you're doing for yourself because we've never had a retired fire chief in Hope. And I became the first paid. I now become the first retired fire chief because we've
Hmm.
had fire chiefs, volunteers, and they got elected out or quit and they're still working or if they're still around anymore. They have jobs or retired in from their occupations. But no one's ever retired from our fire department, and I'm the first. So I think there's significance in that.
There is. And that seems to be one of the quieter issues I have heard from retirees themselves after getting the snip, this kind of missing connection that they're really craving despite potentially being involved with associations. I just came back from a Columbus conference with chiefs, and they had a brilliant idea of having them do rehab. They were the rehab truck.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I want to tell people about that. And then
Yep.
also on especially big incidents, is they also come to the stress debriefing, the
Yep.
critical incident stress debriefing is, and then that wisdom and that mentorship of the peer support aspect kicks in too. That's a
Yeah.
pretty good model.
And that would be my role. That would
Mhm.
be my role if we ever had that major incident. I still have gear, I still have equipment that I'm able to properly be protected. One of the reasons why I'm still a member on paper is I am protected. I'm covered legally if I get hurt, et cetera, et cetera. So the intent is that you take a page out of other colleagues' books, as I said, to work in the cold zone, to be a fire incident person where you're helping out, doing rehab, doing bottle filling, doing what have you. That's my role.
Okay.
And again, the peer support side, because of what the work I've done now in the last couple of years now with the BC Fire Chiefs Association, as a part of the peer support team, we've taken the IAFF peer support team training, we've
Hmm.
taken suicide intervention, we've taken all kinds of different other sessions that I'm now in a position to help step in with our own people and
Hmm.
bring this reality into a smaller town department. We have gone so far now since I've left in the last 2 years, so far. It is absolutely amazing. And you can't help, again, significance, feel proud to
Hmm.
walk in the fire hall today because I left the fire department as the one paid person that tried to do everything management style wise that
Hmm.
needed to be done. That's now been replaced by five people.
Hmm.
And those five people all have five different roles. But again, I was trying to accomplish one fifth of all what they do.
Hmm.
And it's pretty cool. to see this where it is today. Call volumes have gone up, as most departments have done. What you do is different, the way you respond is different, but there's a whole new, shall I say, urgency to be involved in the fire service. A lot more, I mean, like I say, we had the beer in the fire halls, we had the pool tables. I was the guy that took them away.
Hmm.
And the firefighters that left the department will always remember me as the person that took away the beer fridge, took away the pool table. But when I said to the newer generation coming in to say, this is not who we are, this is not a social club. We do
Yeah.
enjoy a cold beverage now and again in a certain setting, in
Hmm.
an environment where you're not going to respond to a call should it happen. But we don't do like we used to do. And I need to tell the stories. I've always got a story, and it always comes out. I don't necessarily want to be that guy that goes, I remember back in the day, but yeah, I do.
Speaking of your alter ego in broadcasting, how did that help you as a fire chief?
How did it help me? Maybe, and maybe helped me and hurt me
Mm.
because the community knew me as this. If you're on radio and you do a morning radio show, tend to be a character, right? I was fortunate in the day that I was a broadcaster before social media. We were social media.
Hmm.
We were the influencers. But we said in a small town, people listened to. We did stuff that I'm proud of, that we created. We put a message out that people needed to hear. And you go back on the stories and old school radio. I mean, if you've ever seen the television show WKRP in Cincinnati, that's the real deal.
Hmm.
That's exactly the way we lived in broadcast. And we went, oh, this is the same thing. So
Hmm.
for me, I took my radio, my style, and I was around and about in the community. That may have hurt me in the fire service because people thought of me as that character. They thought of not Tom, but Tommy, who was on the radio, and figured that, well, what's he know about being a fire chief? What I've taken to the department, one of the things I ended up taking to the department was the on-air sound, if that makes sense. And I'll explain. I was the kind of person that didn't want my voice to sound like I wasn't into it because I knew
Hmm.
that everything I said is going to be interpreted on the radio to something going on. So
Hmm.
there was training I had in broadcasting because if you couldn't see me, it's
Hmm.
theater of the mind. And the way I speak is going to send a message before you even hear what I say. On fire calls, I always tried to teach my people how to talk, how to use the radio, because it's a very simple thing when you size up a call. If you click the mic, key the mic, and all of a sudden it's a big fire.
Hmm.
Okay, calm.
Yeah.
This, this is the broadcast you're going to make. You're going to go through the who, what, where, when, why. You're going to tell us what we've got and what we're going to do about it, and give information that this odd know that you have an audience. In turn, whenever I used the radio and I was talking, I knew I had an audience.
Hmm.
You're taught in radio that you're only speaking to one person.
Hmm.
That this conversation you and I are having right now, there's only one person on the other end listening to it. And so I make sure that person is included and understands and hears what I have to say. That will multiply to everyone else. The idea that you're on the radio and you jump on the, or I jump on the air and give a size up of a call or I get first on scene, I made sure what I said was part of the training that I had given them and made sure they heard the way I delivered it, so
Hmm.
that they would in turn deliver it hopefully the same way when they were in that position.
Hmm.
So that's what I used to use. Guys always told me I was notorious on the radio. I would get up at 3 in the morning for a call because I was on 24 hours. Get up at 3 in the morning for a call. You ever wake up at 3 in the morning, answer your phone and try to sound normal? That's what I did. I was doing warm-up exercises before I jumped on the radio because I didn't want to sound like I just got out of bed.
Yeah.
I wanted to sound like I'd been up for hours. The same way I go to a radio station at 4 a.m. to prep for a start at 6 o'clock, and the first thing you hear at 6 a.m. is me speaking like I've been there all day.
Hmm.
And that's all proper. But dispatch, we're on. Yeah, I don't want to sound like that. I want
Hmm.
to come across, present myself. So what they hear at the other end is a confident professional that is ready to do the job and doesn't sound like they're not prepared. That's one of the things I've taken from it, I guess.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Moravian model? where it says communication is only 7% the words you use, 60% is your body language, and then the rest is tonality, the melody of your voice. And with radio, you only have words and tone. So
That's right.
you better get that tone right.
You don't see the face. You don't see the face. And that was the cool thing of radio, to speak where the person doesn't see what you look like. First off, they don't know what you look like, maybe, but they also don't know what you're doing behind the scenes with your smile. And the way your sound is how you look.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've had the odd dispatcher come back to me. And he said sometimes when I was on the air, not that I was doing a radio thing, but yeah, don't make me use my radio voice because that you've probably been on a call before where the firefighter or the officer, a rookie officer, or any officer jumps on the air and you can tell just before they say anything that there's something going on. Like
Mm-hmm.
their voice is just right now, you can, they're just hyperventilating. They're not breathing from their diaphragm. It's like they're running out of breath and like they ran to the scene. You know right away that this is
Mm-hmm.
something serious. And sometimes that may be good because it does
Mm-hmm.
change your attitude. But
Mm-hmm.
again, remaining calm, still trying to convey the message that we have a serious event here, but still trying to remain calm. That's part of leadership, is to give the impression that you actually have control,
Mm-hmm.
because nothing demeans the organization faster than the incoming crew going, uh-oh, we're in trouble. We got a major event and this person has no idea what they're doing on scene. You do not instill confidence when you don't sound like you're confident.
No, that is so true. I have done quite a bit of dispatching, and so I understand being on the receiving end of that, of like, oh
Yes.
boy, here we go.
And what is, I've always had a thing for dispatch. I want to include dispatch. Dispatch doesn't live in our community. It always has been a regional center, and currently our dispatch is in Vancouver. After a call, especially a large, serious type call, that, and which calls aren't serious, but the major kind of events where the dispatcher I could tell was having some issues, would call them afterward and either check on them and or tell them what we had, tell
Hmm.
them what the outcome was. Because I found that, and I was told and appreciated from some of these folks that said, when the person called us, it was just like all hell was breaking loose. And we didn't know what they had. And then all of a sudden we handed over to you and you guys took over and that was the end of it, so to speak, until you're back in quarters. So the ability to check in with them, to say, hey, this is what happened. We met that lady, that this was the call, this
Hmm.
was the outcome of the call. They appreciate that. Thank you for, because you're part of the team. You're part of that call. Just because you dispatch us doesn't mean you should be forgotten to find out how things worked out.
Exactly. Since you are a storyteller, what tips do you have besides making sure that your tonality conveys your professionalism? What other storytelling tips do you have for those of us in the fire service?
Mm, when you take media training, I do some of that stuff as well. And I had a trainer way back that taught the lesson, simple little lesson on how to deal with a reporter asking you a question. And I take this story because it's part of storytelling
Hmm.
and involves storytelling where you, how did this fire happen? Simple question. Here's the microphone in your face, where you mentally respond to the question in three
Hmm.
parts, where you say, okay, what happened? How did the fire start? Then you say why it started, maybe a fire prevention message. And then is there an anecdote around the fire or the message that you want to send? When you give this information to the reporter, you reverse it and give it back in the opposite way. You start with an anecdote, start with the story, and then you start to talk about why fire prevention, why smoke alarms are important, which in terms of the fact that these people were able to exit this house, they were able to get out of this building because they had a working smoke alarm, and which the fires that started in the kitchen. Boom. Simple as that. So again, the ability to tell the story, to have a point, to have a reason why, and to get their attention early, to get
Hmm.
their attention to say, you'll never believe what happened the other day. But I remember back on a fire call back in 2004, we actually went to that address, and believe it or not, da, 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 there's your story. I will tell a story now, in fact, of a person that I met at a social function at Christmas time.
Hmm.
And again, I tell this story quite often to presentations and to people, and it's about the story and how you tell it. But I could tell it very simply and said, I met this person and I met this person again. That's it. But no, I say, no, I went to a social function. It was Christmas time, having a cocktail. standing around talking to people. I'm out of uniform. I'm there's a social event.
Mhm.
And this individual said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a fire chief." "Oh, fire chief? Where?" I said, "Here." "Hope? You have a fire chief in Hope? It's a small town." "Well, yeah, it must be a volunteer fire department." "As a matter of fact, it is. I'm the only paid person." "Oh, well, I live in the big city in the lower mainland in the greater Vancouver area. We have professional fire departments."
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, do tell." So now in the storytelling process is about listening. It's
Mhm.
about listening to what the person has to say before jumping to any conclusions because I'm going to have some fun with this. I want to hear what this person has to say. And this person goes on to tell me that if they ever have a need for the service of a fire department, that they would prefer that a professional
Mhm.
attend to them.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, I will leave it at that and walk away and say, have a nice day. It was Christmas time. Merry Christmas. And boom, I'm going to not engage with this person about the volunteer versus career issue.
Mhm.
And the next day, we had a call out on
Mhm.
the highway. And it was snowing and it was cars in the ditch. And we got called out there. And I responded in my chief's vehicle, get on scene first. And the ambulance paramedics came over to me and said, "Can you go check that car?" Person slumped over the steering wheel. So I went in there. There's a lady sitting in the car.
Mhm.
I recognized her.
Mhm.
She had a little cut in her head and she
Mhm.
didn't recognize me, but it was the same lady. And I felt like saying, "Oh, would you mind if I attend to you or would you like a professional?" So you can tell that story very simply and just say, "Here, I met this lady. I went to a call that she didn't like volunteers, but I ended up going to a call on with her as a patient the next day." Tell the story, weave the tale, and make some fun out of it. Yeah, it's about making sure that the message is understood, it's underlying, but the message is you'll never know who you run into and who you meet. You'll meet again, and you're going to impact their lives in some way, and you're going to do it professionally.
Yes, I love that. Grab their heart first and then appeal to
Mhm.
their mind.
And that just goes right back to peer support. And maybe that's
Mhm.
why I understand and think I'm fairly good at peer support is that listening. You need to hear, and you don't necessarily tell stories in peer support. There's not a lot of talking going on, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of interviewing. There's
Mhm.
a lot of listening, listening to what they say and basing your questions on where they would go to. It's a typical interview style when you have a talk show where you make it easy for the person to answer the questions. You don't go in there and go, "What do you think of this?" But I'm going to ask you a question I think I know you're going to answer, or I know you're passionate about. I'm going to feed you that question, and then you're going to come back and you're going to be able to speak knowledgeably and you're
Mhm.
going to speak passionately about the topic. That's the best thing you can do with people is to make them feel included, listen to what they have to say, and then base some of the questions on encouraging what they have to say. You know, the head bobbing, television reporters do it, all reporters do it. And
Mhm.
if you see it on TV, that's what you're trained in school, right? You're told to carry on, keep talking, keep talking. Yes, yes, tell me more. Yeah, it's a matter of including people and making them want to tell their story. Everyone's got
Mhm.
a story. It could
Mhm.
be their story. It could be a story about what happened. It could be a story about why we do what we do, why we did what we did. But let people talk. Let people give their version. It's not, why did you do this? I don't know. Okay. Well, you're going to do it again? No, I'm not. Thank you. Talk to them.
Yeah, excellent. And as we start to wrap things up, I always like to leave our viewers with one kind of tool or resource to continue their learning from this conversation. Tom, what would you recommend we check out today?
Well, a shameless plug, I've referred to some of the writing that I've done, and I have a colleague in Eastern Canada, Newfoundland, that shares the column we write, him and I do together. We share month alternating. It's Firefighting in Canada magazine, and it is a column called Volunteer Vision. In Volunteer Vision, we're both paid chiefs. We are largely volunteer fire departments. He joined in 83. I joined in 83. I talk weird things. I write down weird thoughts, stories that come to mind with hopefully a message on being a leader, being a chief, being a volunteer firefighter, and putting things in perspective. I think the biggest thing you can do in the volunteer fire service is understand that you're not alone. I took over a department that sort of existed as its own fire department. We were our own department. We don't talk to any other fire departments. We don't associate. We are not part of a bigger conglomerate. Once you make people realize they are part of a bigger organization, that the fire service is worldwide, that you can show them that what you do is no different than what your neighbors do and what the people in the next state or province do. So I wrote about moss and grass. I wrote about the challenges of being a fire chief, like a duck floating on the water, that people don't see what's going on underneath the water, but you're always looking like you're in charge and in control. I've been doing this since probably 2010. I think I've been contributing to the magazine. My buddy wrote one time a very compelling article, I thought, was about the memorials on the side of highways, where he said, maybe it's time to stop that. You don't realize what message you're sending to the responders of the world that drive by a cross on the side of a road. At the end of the day, I go, yeah, I remember either I was on that scene or a first responder was on that scene. And they have to drive by that maybe every day. And
Yeah.
it's constant reminder. And maybe it's time to tell the public, it's time to realize the consequences of your actions. Yeah, it might be honorable. We appreciate the tribute. We appreciate what you're trying to recognize. But at some point, you've got to consider what message you're sending.
Yeah.
And that's one of the articles he wrote. But it's funny how we've aligned over the years, him and I. We had never met until we met many years ago after we were writing the column. And it's like we've known each other for years. Before that, it's incredible. My podcasts are in there as well. Take a look, take a listen. What we call bulletin board material might be in there where we'll talk about my current column as we record this. I actually wrote about 10 years ago. 10
Hmm.
years, what happened? And I looked 10 years ago to see my column, realized that in 2015, I had made the comment about how many firefighters are going to be in your hall 10 years later. How many of these new recruits 10 years from now will be there in 2025? And I think back and go, wow, how many 10-year pins did we hand out this year? Not very many. How about
Yeah.
none?
Yeah.
And that just shows the state of the fire service, where you look back and remember that we're still talking about recruitment, we're still talking about retention, we're still talking about this, but at the end of the day, we're still doing the job, we're still helping people and making a difference in their lives and in the lives of people in our community.
Hmm. Excellent. Oh, yeah, of course. That's the nature of the job, right? The significance,
Absolutely.
being the one to be there in the moment on someone's
Absolutely.
worst day. So, any closing thoughts as we wrap this whole conversation up? Anything that wasn't said that you would like to
I,
say before we
I
go?
just uh, I just appreciate I do the podcast, you do the podcast. I appreciate you and what the people like you and all of us that do this. It's important to share the message. I think we didn't have this kind of vehicle back in the day. I certainly couldn't go on the radio and talk about the fire service and promote the fire service. What we're doing, and again, the audience, certainly when you understand who your audience is, the fire service most likely, but for those that are new in the service, that are involved, get involved. Understand and realize that yes, you are making a difference in your community. You are making a difference in someone else's life, and you're making a difference in your own life. Because think back that what would I do today if I hadn't been in the fire department, getting involved in a volunteer or even a career state? What would I have done otherwise? And you go, wow, kind of lucky to be doing this. It's like retirement. Retirement to me is, I felt bad for the first year and a half that I was enjoying it. I still am. And I felt like guilty that I wasn't working, but I was still having fun. I was at the fire hall. I was doing whatever I want to do. And people say, what are you going to do when you're retired? Well, it's not what I'm going to do. It's what I'm not going to do. And when I turned the pager off, that was a huge thing. Huge thing to go click. And there was a little ceremony on the house. We had a little moment. Let's turn this off because for 23 years, I'd had that by my desk 24 hours a day, plus the time in as a volunteer on top of that, where I had it on my bedside table. And that got to a point where I was regretting having it there at some point near the end. And that's an aside. But the biggest thing you can say is recognize what people do in the fire service. The moment you sign the dotted line and say, I want to be a member of the fire department, is the moment you become a hero to kids. And that is enough pressure right there. And you know nothing. And you know nothing. I just agreed to join the department. Guess what? You're now a hero to kids. There's pressure.
There is. It's good pressure, though. It keeps you on your toes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, today for sharing your insights. And we will link the things that Tom mentioned, the
Cool.
podcast and the magazine in the links below in the description box of this video. And a big thank you to our community members. If you're still listening, you're amazing. We appreciate you. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments after this episode, feel free to reach out to me at info@firepowerx.com. I'm happy to field any communication that you have with us. And thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.